Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We're real pleased to have a member of the House of Delegates, Riley Ingram. Good to see you, Chairman of Counties, Cities, and Towns.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Senator Amanda Chase, good to see you.
Good to see you, Woody. Good to be back.
Crossover went over yesterday.
Yes.
Valentine's Day today.
Yes.
You're about to get a whole bunch of bills from the House. You will get less from the Senate. Who's got to work the hardest now?
Now, see, for the first half, Woody, the House definitely works the hardest. But for the second half, we send what we haven't killed already in committees, we send over to the Senate. So it's better for both of us, but the Senate now has more of a load than what we have.
Well, Senator Chase, you have a bill that would have a dramatic impact on small businesses, especially in the Commonwealth, in terms of reducing regulation. Can you talk to us about that?
I'd love to. So Senate Bill 20 is a regulatory reform bill, and it actually has the endorsement of the governor. So I'm very excited about that. It passed out of the Senate, and so what this bill does, you know, a lot of business owners that come to us, they talk about all this red tape that they're faced with anytime they want to deal with a state agency. You know, there's red tape, there's a lot of hoops to jump through. Overly burdensome regulatory requirements is what we're looking at. So the goal of this bill is to kind of start a pilot program just to make sure that it works and in a smaller environment. We're going to target two departments, the Department of Professional and Occupational Licensing and the Department of Criminal Justice Services, and actually 40% of all regulations come from those two departments. So the goal of this is to reduce that type of regulatory requirement, and we're going to be working with the Secretary of Finance to make sure this happens, and we've already met, and looking forward to working with Secretary Lane, who I worked with back when he was Transportation Secretary, and now he's Secretary of Finance. So we're already off to a good start.
So I take it the reason why you're working with the Secretary of Finance is because some of this could have an impact on the budget.
Well, yes, and also he's going to be directing it. I had a similar bill last year that passed out of the Senate, and this bill is a little different. Last year we created a commission that it would actually oversee this, and this is actually a little bit different, that we're not creating that commission. And I think some of the concern was, are we going to create a bureaucratic agency that's kind of defeating what we're trying to do? So we're trying to go through some existing infrastructure through the Department of Planning and Budget. So they're going to kind of keep track and report on that.
So this would make it easier for a small business person or even an individual who wanted to go into a certain line of work to get into that line of work quicker and more efficiently, I take it.
That is the goal of the bill, and we're going to certainly do our best to make sure that happens.
Riley, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Secretary Lane, I am impressed with. He was the Secretary of Transportation under McCollum. But what I like about him is he tells it like it is. He's very upfront. He's a straight shooter, and he's a good guy. I think he'll do a good job because, you know, Rick Brown was there for years and did a super job. He was just a great man, and I really and truly think that Secretary Lane is going to do a great job also.
You're absolutely right. He made a presentation in January, I believe, before the Appropriations Committee, where he told it like it is. He said, be very careful. All these monies came in at the end of the month, these non-withholding revenues. Don't think it's a windfall yet.
That's right. And you know, just like Rick Brown told us the same thing, basically. He said that, so much money came in during the month of December, but under the tax cuts and all that the administration up in Washington has done, a lot of people paid their taxes in December. So we're not going to know the impact of all this until probably May, till the end of April, 1st of May, when all this comes about. Having said that, I think both the Senate and the House, we're going to be putting a budget together that is a lean budget, because then we can always come back and do something different later. And I think that this year we are looking at. I think the governor is going to work with us on this, just education and work requirement on the Medicaid expansion. I think that if we can get that done, I can't speak for the rest of the members of the House or the Senate, either one, but I think that if there's a compromise done, I think we can do something. And the reason this is so important is because if we do not do this, what we're looking at, Woody, is a $400 million hole in the budget that we've got to fill. That means a lot of cuts, and people are not going to like it. So we need to make sure that we're looking out for all the Virginians to do what is the right thing to do, and I think that the governor's going to work with us on that.
And of course, Senator Chase, that Medicaid expansion issue has been here as long as you have, if not longer.
Right.
As the delegate indicates, there appears to be a chance for some reasonable compromise this session, and I know there's a bill that just passed the Senate, patroned by Senator Donovan, which attempts to target a very smaller population for Medicaid expansion. But where do you think things are now, and what are the chances of a compromise, you think, this year?
Sure. So Senator Donovan actually had probably 6 bills together to kind of accomplish a comprehensive type of approach. And it's not Medicaid expansion. It's clearly an alternative to Medicaid. So I want to be very clear on that. And we still, and Senator Donovan was very clear, we don't have the funding mechanism in place for that. And while we in the Senate, we got 40 votes on our prioritization of how we would reform Medicaid, I think that's what we do agree on. There is some opportunity, quite a bit of opportunity for reforming Medicaid. And one thing that I've supported has been we have to fulfill the obligation that we already have to those who have intellectual disability waivers, who have the disability waivers. And there are people that have been on that list for 10 plus years. And so one of the things that I've really lobbied for is this is a current obligation. There's about 2,500 individuals who fall into that category. And we need to figure out a way in the existing budget to take care of those people. One of the things that we had contemplated at one point was, do we create a hospital assessment for these hospitals that are not supporting COPN reform or Certificate of Public Need reform, to create some more competition, hopefully drive down some of the prices. And the hospitals have many of them have resisted that. And so we had contemplated maybe what we do is we come up with with some type of assessment to these hospitals where we assess them a fee, or some call it a bed tax. I don't like really to use that, but an assessment on these hospitals to incentivize them to work with us on reforming, and so we can get those prices down. But also we could use that money from that assessment kind of as a fine, and then use that money to maybe funding some of these 2,500 DD waivers. I mean, that's what I would like to do. That's not what we passed yesterday. What we passed was basically a shell bill that says this is what we would like to do. We've created some opportunities for business owners to have kind of a coalition of health insurance. There's different options. I know Wagner had a bill, Sturdivant had a bill, Senator Reeves had a bill, and that was all discussed yesterday. And what we're trying to do is create alternatives. We recognize that Optima, we recognize several of the insurance companies had initially pulled out of Virginia. They came back in under the Commissioner of Insurance, and now the insurance premiums have gone up 50 and 60%, so that everyday average Virginians are saying, I can't afford my health insurance. And so we've really tried to come up with creative, out-of-the-box solutions that we haven't previously talked about before to kind of alleviate or let the pressure out, if you will. And so we're still working on it. I mean, we've taken a different approach, I think, than the House, who I think has put in the work requirement with the full-blown Medicaid expansion. But you know, the Senate has taken a very different approach with no Medicaid expansion, but yet an alternative to Medicaid expansion.
The sentence is exactly right, Woody. What we're looking at is the hospitals are going to have to take a part in this, and I think that they will be willing to do this. And the reason for it is, you can go to most any hospital you want to on a Friday or Saturday night, and the emergency rooms are full of people with no insurance. The hospital takes care of them, so that's money that they actually lose when they take on these patients. So I think that something will be done. But see, in some cases, just like the senator was talking about a minute ago, we have to get permission from Washington to do some of these things. So that's going to be part of it too. Woody, we pass a lot of bills over here that really mean a lot to a lot of people, but then we pass some. We look at some bills that people put in that are not, well, like drunk driving on your own property. I mean, who would think you'd want to drink and drive on your own property?
Drunk driving on your own property.
I guess they're worried about the tractor or something, you know. But anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in.
But anyway, we're talking about a lot of different population groups who may or may not be able to either afford health care or get subsidies under the Affordable Care Act, but there are a bunch of people in the middle there who just can't, because of the premium increases, get anything now. Right. And so those are the kinds of groups of individuals that Senator Donovan is working on behalf of, and you are working on behalf of as well. And when we talk about the current Medicaid population, these are a lot of pregnant women. Right. These are the elderly, the disabled. Talk to us a little bit more about these waivers that the state has to get from the federal government.
Well, every year since I've been here, and Woody, you know I've been here a long time, but we have extended waivers more and more and more. These are for people with disabilities that the home right now. Some of them are being cared for in their home. The wife or whatever cannot take a job because they have to be there with this person, and in a lot of cases these people are 18, 20, 22, 23 years old, and so with the waiver program, they're able to get a caregiver to come in and actually help with this child, and it really does help a lot of people. And every year we take on more waivers. Right now, Woody, the health care is 22% of our entire budget.
22% of the budget, and climbing, I tell you.
And climbing, yes. And the way it's going, we're going to be at 25 or 26% within the next 8 to 10 years. And that is a big, big driver of this. And if we did all the ones that are on the waiting list, it would be a budget buster. There's no question about it.
What impact do these waivers have, if at all, or association with the issues surrounding the closing of the Central Virginia Training Center, for example? Is that an issue as well?
Well, let me just take a bigger approach here, because there is definitely a paradigm shift, if you will, with our young people, and trying to sort of incarcerate them to allow them to go through more rehabilitation, those types of things. I've talked to several of our JDR judges, juvenile domestic relations judges, on bringing these kids out of Bon Air, correctional facilities, and others. So there's a big paradigm shift. But I want to go to something that Delegate Ingram mentioned earlier. I think it's important for people to realize Virginia is very different than at the federal level. We must balance our budget, and so we have really tough decisions to make. One of two things: we either raise taxes, which neither of us is going to do, or you cut services, and we really don't want to do that either. But that's a tough situation to be in. because we don't want to cut funding to education. Education is very important. I'm a mother of 4 kids and 2 who are still in grade school. You know, you look at our roads, our crumbling infrastructure. I have bridges in my district, and I'm sure Riley does too, where you can't even drive fire trucks over those bridges because of our crumbling infrastructure. So we can't cut transportation. And like Riley was saying, our budget right now is at least 22%. It used to be 2% of the budget. So you know, while you hear people and their needs and their struggles and those types of things, we're going to have to be creative and come up with ideas outside the box. And right now we're kind of in limbo because we don't know what the federal government is going to do. And I almost feel like we should call for a pause, if you will, until we can figure out what exactly is going to happen. Are we going to get a block grant from the federal government? And if we get a block grant, how much money is that going to be? And I think we should prioritize, you know, these DD and ID waivers. And I know it's called something else different, and I can't remember what that is right now. But they've totally, you know, changed the way that goes about. Before we add anything else, add any more people to that system, we need to honor our current obligation that we have now. Is my recommendation.
Right.
I think one of your colleagues has an interesting bill on the House side, Delegate Moorfield. It has to do with an attempt to revitalize Southside and Southwest Virginia by giving companies who agree to locate there and hire people there a tax break for the corporation, but also a tax break for the employees that they hire.
Woody, I voted for that bill, and I'll tell you why. This is for Southwest Virginia, but Delegate LaCherice Aird also co-patroned that bill and worked with him because Petersburg is a distressed area also. And of course Hopewell somewhat is distressed. But the reason I agree with this bill is because this is not for companies that are already here in Virginia. These are strictly for companies that come in. So therefore it doesn't cost the taxpayers of Virginia any money at all. And now, there was a question as to why it was 10 years, but the answer to that, Delegate Moorfield answered that by saying that this is to give them a chance to come forward. And I think that it's, especially out in Southwest Virginia, the people out there, they really are hurting with all the distress on coal. So many people depended on coal for jobs, and they're not there anymore. They're still mining coal, but most of the coal that's being mined today is going overseas. It's not staying here in Virginia or in the United States. So I definitely think it was a good thing. I really do.
I don't know if there's a Senate analog, but notwithstanding that, you're going to be faced with addressing that issue over on the Senate side. What's your feeling on it without having reviewed it in detail?
Well, I try not to speak about a whole bunch of things that I haven't read. I've learned my
one,
lesson
yeah.
on that one. You know, it's a tough issue to face. I mean, we do have a lot of needs in some of the areas where the unemployment is much higher than in our area, and you see the communities that are struggling there. I mean, I talked to Senator Dance about Petersburg, for instance, and the struggles they're having there, and I also saw where Delegate LaCherice Aird had put in the idea of incentivizing businesses to kind of come to those more depressed regions, and I think we should maybe try it, maybe put a sunset on it. So if it's it's an idea that we give it an opportunity to work, but have a kill switch at the end of it in case, you know, it's not such a great idea. You have to be careful with that because a lot of businesses don't want to come unless they feel like they put the investment into it. You know, they want to make sure that there's going to be a good return on that investment. But I think it's a worthwhile conversation to have those discussions with businesses, and you know, but I love that they're thinking outside of the box. And that's what we're going to have to do to fix some of these problems.
And I definitely agree with that. I definitely think we should have a sunset on it, and for the people in the audience, so that it has an ending date, okay? So that it's not forever and ever and ever. And I think that's a great idea. And then if it doesn't work out, we can always come back and change it.
I guess one of the other issues raised was the exemption of employees not to be subject to a state income tax. versus employees of other companies who happen to be in Southwest Virginia or Southside?
Woody, when you have an action, there's always a reaction, okay? And I have heard from some people saying that, you know, if this is done there, why can't we do it here? So there is some controversy there, and about that very thing that you're speaking of. But I think that with a sunset, and with a trial basis, and companies that are not here in Virginia, I think it's a good idea.
Another issue that has garnered quite a publicity is the electric utility regulation. I believe a bill passed the House yesterday with an amendment.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
The amendment helps the bill a lot. It really does. And I have not read the entire bill. I have scanned through it. As a matter of fact, I've got a piece here in my pocket as to the real good things about it. I think that there was something about Dominion double dipping. That amendment that we approved on the House side, if they're not double dipping, they definitely will not. Okay, if they were, it cures that. So, so I think that now it does save the people a lot. I'm not going to read all of it, but part of the refund to the ratepayers is going to come right away, starting this coming July. But anytime you have a compromise, there are some good things, there are some bad things, you know. In other words, you don't get everything you want, so it's a compromise situation. But I think that before we get out of here on March the 10th, I think that you will find a bill that is there, puts it back under State Corporation Commission. I think that I think the Senator, I think Amanda here has had a big part in that also. I think that it has brought Dominion to the table to negotiate in good faith to try to get this done. But I think that with the amendment, the bill is much better than what it was before. But anyway, Amanda knows a lot more.
And of course, Senator, this bill has a long history. It's quite complicated as well, and it deals with the jurisdiction of the State Corporation Commission, a bill back in 2015, a court case in between 2015 and now. So what passed the Senate?
So, and I think it's good for our viewing audience to understand, back in 2015, President Obama was our president. And so the concern was that if we're going to be in compliance with the Clean Power Bill, we were getting national mandates from EPA to cap and seal the coal ash, which we'll talk about later, cap the coal ash plants where they produce the electricity and the byproduct was the coal ash. But they were also concerned, and the General Assembly was concerned, that if there was not some type of rate freeze that was put in place, that all these expenditures that Dominion was having to make would basically be passed on to the ratepayer, because the State Corporation Commission allows Dominion to recoup that cost. And you'll see it as in the form of a rate adjustment clause on your bill. And so, their thinking was that they were looking out for the consumer and doing what's best. But then what happened? The administration changed. We now have the Trump administration. The environment has changed. Scott Pruitt with the EPA has relaxed a lot of this comprehensive environmental type of legislation. And so we have had to, at the General Assembly, revisit this situation. And even Dominion was honest and said, look, we agree, the environment has changed at the federal level. It's time for us to relook at this whole issue of freezing these rates in place. I got a little criticism on the floor for calling it a big mistake, but I think our constituents back home, they think it was a big mistake to have the General Assembly. And I was pretty honest on the floor, and I said I really feel like the State Corporation Commission should be the one with the authority to determine those rates, and the General Assembly really should stay out of this. The new bill that passed out of the Senate does give that oversight to the State Corporation Commission, but the reason that I voted against the bill is for this reason. It has I call it a Christmas tree bill. It's got a lot of bells and whistles in it, and I really think that we need to be very careful that we are not spending so much on there that we end up with another rate adjustment clause. And what could happen is customers could go without seeing any type of refund, which I think we owe them. And I've always asked, show me the numbers. What does that refund look like? Is it $6? Is it $20? Is it $50? If it's just a couple dollars and you're looking to transform our grid, which I agree, you know, we do need to have some grid transformation, upgrade the technologies, make sure it's secure. A lot of other, I call it, you know, the solar power, looking at, you know, other innovative ways to get our electricity, renewables, that type of thing. There are a number of other good things in there, but I always come down to what is it going to cost? And until I get that answer, I'm not going to vote yes. So I was a no on it, but I am glad that it continued, and I hope that you all are going to amend it over there to make sure that we're not, and I'm glad that they put the amendment on it, so we're not paying twice, building it into first of all, they were going to take away the refund, and then they were going to build whatever expenditures into that base rate, basically creating a double charge to the consumer. So
And Woody, you know, and all of us know, whenever you start undergrounding, which
That's
is
right.
wonderful, I wish they were all underground. I don't like seeing them even on the road or in my front yard. However, putting the service underground is very expensive. And it's because, one reason is because you have to be careful because of the heat that that is there. So that's an issue. Also, wind power. Wind power is very, very expensive. Solar power, very, very expensive. Now, it's great for the environment, well, to a certain extent. I mean, the big turbines, they're going to kill a few birds here and there, but it's a lot of moving parts there that you have to look at. And it's like Senator said, there are a lot of good things in there. There are some things that are so-so, but I understand. But I voted for the bill with the amendment. I voted for it, and the reason for it is because of the good things that are in there and starting to give back $100 and some million as of July 1st of this year.
30 seconds, coal ash. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. We're going to keep the moratorium in place, which is good. We have some new technology which has emerged since we had that initial report. We got the report back in December with how much it's going to cost for excavating the coal ash, but now we're looking at recycling, and we're doing it on site, so we don't create a second public safety issue.
Great. Well, thank you both for being here. Amanda Chase, Riley Ingram.
Thanks for
Good
having
luck
us.
the rest of the session.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.